Alright, so this is just a demonstration on how to use, we're going to use pine needles for a different type of fletching. Fletching for arrows and other projectiles are used mainly for creating drag. So if you say this is the front that has either your fire hardened tip or has your stone point on it or broadhead or whatever your killing in is, if there isn't anything to give it the aerodynamics any drag, the most likely, depending on how long the projectile is too, the back end will want to catch up with the front end, and so you'll have this kind of spin, so it won't fly straight. And this will be specifically for what I'm designing this for, specifically for an Atl-Atl point, not a bow projectile, or Atl-Atl dart, not a bow arrow. And Atl-Atl darts can be very, very long. The resource that we'd have here would probably be willow that can go quite straight and quite long, and reed, as well as cattail. But you have to treat those differently. Hopefully we'll be able to kind of study and experiment with those different materials. Well, for now I just have kind of like a painted wooden dowel from the store, a little bit warped, but I'm not really concerned about it because I'm just using this for demo. I'm not using it for shooting. So first thing, since this will be an Atl-Atl dart, we're going to find an end that we're going to basically create a hole or a space for the nipple of the Atl-Atl that will fit like this. Atl-Atl is also known as a spear thrower. Okay, and we'll work on building one of those, a real basic rustic primitive one, and then a more robust stylized one. But for now I want to kind of just talk about the fletching using pine needles. You can use feathers. For arrow projectiles, you generally use 3 feathers from the same same wing, and that causes the arrow to spin, similar to rifling in modern day rifle barrels. It causes the bullet or the projectile to spin, which creates a straighter trajectory and more accuracy. The way an Atl-Atl is structured, you usually just need 2 fletching from the same wing of most likely goose or turkey or something along those lines, a big bird like that. We'll do that later on. For now I just want to demo the pine needles. Okay, so this may not be necessary, but it's a good precaution when you are splitting any type of wood or drilling some sort of hole into the end of a wood, a dowel or something like that, because you don't want it to split. So I've got some artificial sinew. Real sinew would work. We'll probably work with some of that later on. I want a decent length of it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our bladed tool, could be a stone tool, whatever. And I just want a little bit of length of this artificial sinew, which is basically waxed nylon. And set that aside. And then what I want to do is at the end here, I want to do common whipping. And I've got videos on how to do this particular type of knot. And what I want to do is I want to reinforce the tip of the shaft, or the end of the shaft, arrow or dart or whatever projectile, whatever you want to call it, by wrapping it with our cordage. And in this case it is going to be waxed nylon. And if you want to know how to do this, then I'll put a link below on how to do this type of whipping or wrapping. But all I'm doing is just wrapping this around a little bit so it reinforces. And so then when I get to the end of it here, there's a loop that I'm going to run the end of my running end through the loop, and at the end here is the tail of the loop, and I pull the loop, and I want to pull this under our wrap, just a little bit, not all the way through. And then that's what will solidify and anchor everything in. At that point, you can cut off these bits here using your cutting tool, and oftentimes, as long as it's underneath your wrap, then it should be safe. And then I can do the same. I'm gonna probably just pull this a little bit more just to be safe so it doesn't come undone. But again, this is just for demo purposes. It's not for real hunting or anything like that. Now this one kind of pressure cut that. Set these aside. Sheath my blade. So the reason why I did that is to reinforce against splitting, okay? And so now what I want to do is I want to take my sharp point of my cutting tool, and I want to start to carefully just start to bore in to the center. And this is where the nipple, I'm not sure that that's the actual term on the Atl-Atl apparatus, but that's what I'll call it for now. And there's many ways to do this. I've used hand drills to do this, pump drills to do it, but for now, just real quick and dirty, just to give you an idea, I just want to start to bore this out. Be careful not to poke yourself with if you don't have a jig or a clamp to do this in. So I just want to kind of go back and forth as I just kind of hollow out the very end of it. They're just going back and forth. Okay, so we're just creating a space wide enough and deep enough for the nipple of the Atl-Atl. Okay. All right, I'm just carefully continuing this on with my EDC folder here. Just again as an example, if you're going completely primitive, you'd obviously use a stone tool of some sort. And you want it, again, you want it deep and wide enough. And we'll say this pin is the nipple of the Atl-Atl, that it sits right in there. So you can hold the Atl-Atl, or you can hold this, the dart and the Atl-Atl together, and then this would function, the nipple would function as kind of like your bowstring if you're used to bow and arrows, and it will push the dart towards your target. Okay, so it would push it like that. So I'm gonna bore just a little bit, so it's a little bit deeper, and again, you can see now the reasoning for the binding. It gives me some reinforcements to work with, so this doesn't start, so the shaft doesn't start to split out. Okay. Okay, so here is the notch or the hole. It actually is green in there because I was trying to use this color pencil to kind of, give it some space, and the tip broke off in there. So now it's green, but again, it doesn't really matter. It's, again, just for demo. But this sits up in there just nicely as if it was the nipple for an Atl-Atl, okay, or a spear thrower. Okay, so it fits up in there, and that's what you want. Again, I'm a little particular with these sorts of things, so I probably will go a little bit deeper, just because I'm not concerned about this breaking apart. It's okay if it flays out a bit. In fact, it works. It'd be even better because it gives more surface area for the nipple to catch onto. But that's the reason for the wrapping. Okay, you may not have to do this. Excuse me, I'm always off camera, please forgive me. May not have to do this depending on the type of wood, but it is recommended. It is recommended that you do that. Okay, so I'll just kind of dig some of that out. If this is a fresh or green piece of wood, it may be a little bit easier to kind of manipulate the space a little bit. See how the more blunt end fits in there? Okay, on the pen here. This is the blunt end, not the writing end, and it just fits in there, just matches in there, which would be good enough. All right, because I just want to hold the shaft into the back of the Atl-Atl while holding the Atl-Atl, and then kind of I want to catch this, but tossing or throwing the atl-atl, which is actually pushing the dart towards my target. Okay, so I think that's enough demo for this part here. I can still refine it and work on it some more, but this is an important step when you're making these notching. Just think of this as for those people that are bowyers out there, the people that are into bow and arrows. Think of this as your notching for your atl-atl darts. This is notching. Okay, it's not the same sort of notching. It's a little different, but the mechanism is the same. It's the bowstring is the projectile, or the mechanism for the projectile, and the nipple of the atl-atl is the projectile or the mechanism for this particular type of projectile. All right. Okay, so we created our notch or our divot for the nipple of the atl-atl to sit into. Now we're ready to apply our fletching. So again, I'm going to use some cordage. The wax nylon is plentiful, as opposed to going out and trying to harvest deer or sinew or dog bane, bast fibers, etc., etc. I could do that, but again, I'm the Urban-Aboriginal. You don't always have the time or the resources. You're usually trampling on somebody's land, or law enforcement gets involved, yada yada yada. So you have to do what you got to do. What I try to share is conceptual, so it should not matter what materials you use as long as they are adequate enough. In this particular case, I'm using wax nylon, like I said. And when you get a good, nice wax nylon, you don't want braided, you want nice and flat, because what it actually operates as is very similar to actual real sinew, or the tendon of bovine fibers, or the bovine tendon fibers, meaning this splits quite easily. So I can make thinner pieces. All right, I can even take this one thin piece here that I have here in my hand, and I can even split it down further, because I don't need a very thick. I could, but the more thicker the fibers that you use, the more weight you put on it. And you want to create drag. You don't want to create competition for your killing point, or your stone tip, or your metal tip. Okay, you just want things light. I mean, when we talk about fletching, and again, I'm not a lifelong bowyer, I'm not a master bowyer or anything like that, or even a master fletcher, which is, by the way, which I'm pretty sure is where a lot of people whose last names are Fletcher or Bowyer come from, is that especially if they have English or Welsh background or something along those lines, that's what their family did. Same as Smith. There would be Fletchers who, that's what they specialized in, was making arrows. According to my understanding of medieval culture, every Sunday everybody had to practice bow and arrow. Every Sunday, that's what you did, I guess, after church, I reckon. And so people had to have the specific job of making fletching and attaching fletching or feathers to the ends of arrows. So thus the term Fletcher, the last name, the surname Fletcher. I've heard it also as a first name, and then Bowyer, different spellings of that, but a bowyer is somebody who makes bows, right? And just because you make bows doesn't mean you don't know how to fletch, and just because you know how to fletch doesn't mean you don't know how to make bows. But that starts to get in the weeds. Again, I'm not a nameologist. I know there's a term for it, but I'm not that type of person. These are just small things that I know about and have a small understanding of. Anyways, I digress. So I've got some, and I can't remember, is this, what are these? Oh yeah, these are white pine needles that I harvested a couple weeks ago. I meant to do this a while ago, and I just let time get away from me, and I didn't do it right away. So these have dried out, and they may be not as manageable or as pliable as they could or should be. But I've tried to use some warm water and reconstitute them probably for the past hour or so, just so that I can start to use them. And so that's what this pot over here is for. So I've got, you know, these pine needles here that I'm picking apart and setting aside. I'm using a piece of leather to set everything on top of, and this leather is what I use for my lap napping to protect my thighs when I'm flint napping. So basically, I'm gonna take a little bit of this and I'll try to do this as neatly or succinctly as possible. We're not going to be in a hurry with this. Now, mind you, you can do cotton, blow darts, blow guns. They use cotton. You could use regular old leaves. The idea is not to add too much weight to the back of your shaft or your projectile, because again, you know what's happening is you're adding more weight. Yeah, that's drag, but your projectile doesn't fly as fast, thus it loses penetration or kinetic entry power, depending on the distance that you can get to your quarry. All right, so I'm gonna use this mount to get it started. Now notice there's a reason why we did our Atl-Atl or dart notching first. The reason why is because I wanted to know where the fletching would end. Okay? It's the same thing as when you're making a arrow for bow and arrow. When you're adding fletching to an arrow for bow and arrow, is you want it further enough away from your fingers so that your hands don't rub against the feathers. That creates unnatural noise. I'm not a deer, boar, elk, bison, raccoon, so only those animals would be able to tell you what would be unnatural to them in their environment. But you don't want to create any noise that's going to alert them that there might be danger nearby. So you want to make sure that you have ample enough space from where you knock your projectile into your weapon system, your projectile weapon system. So about right here is probably going to be right. Hopefully you can see that on camera if I have everything aligned right. So you know you have an idea about how far away you might want it. All right, so I'm just going to take a bundle of these, and they're not too dry. Now what happens with they're nice and green now, but over time they will turn yellow. And so I'm just going to take one, and then hopefully we can do another bundle. But again, we're going to do another common whipping, so you just basically make a bite or a loop long enough for you to grab hold to, and then you want to again make sure that your fletching is reasonably far enough away from the tip, from the end of your knock. Okay. And then what I want to do is let me adjust this a little bit because I think I got too much. Okay. And then it's the same thing, same sort of wrapping. I'm going to start to just wrap the fletching, and as you start to wrap it, you can start to kind of let it spread out a little bit, but you want to kind of lash it down first. Okay, and then you can kind of let it kind of spread around a little bit once you get more comfortable, and then you may have to add more. As you get to going. Okay, so it's looking a little naked on this side, so I will add more fletching to this side here. Okay, and I'll probably just, you know, I'm doing this one-handed, trying to be mindful of my being visible on camera, but I want to give you an idea. So I'm gonna have to wrap this a little bit more before I can actually add another layer. But we want to keep the pull end here away, out of the way of everything, as I start to wrap everything around tightly. Okay, hopefully you kind of get to see this, right? And I still am mindful of where my loop is. I don't want to lose that, because that's what locks everything in. Okay, I may be able to add a little bit more fletching because I added that pretty tightly. We'll put some more needles here. Let me find a good bunch here. Yeah. Now all I'm going to do is attach that. Oops. I'm losing my loop. Nope. Okay, I got my loop is still there. But I'm just going to continue to wrap. So that's pretty good for this demo. That's pretty good. Again, doing such things on camera so that everybody can see it can be a little bit tough. And again, we have to be mindful of weight. So as long as everything is locking down, then I'm gonna go ahead and put this through the loop and finish off this whipping. And then, you know, cut everything, and then I'm gonna add another layer. Doing like that. And then I take my end here and I pull it, and that should start to lock everything in place. Okay, so this is going to be our first rung, and again, you can, if you want to be particular, you could add scissors to it and make it all pretty nice and neat. But if you're in the bush, all you need is drag so that your projectile goes as straight as you possibly can go. Versus you want things functional. It doesn't have to be pretty as long as it works. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer to it, and just kind of go up a couple of more layers. Okay, this is what we have so far. I might clean it up a little bit. Again, this is rough and ready to go as basic fletching. It's just going to create drag for this particular diet. I'm going to add one more. Again, these darts for Atl-Atls tend to be quite long. They can be like 6 feet, 7 feet long. So you might need an additional row of fletching using these pine needles. But, you know, depending on the weight or depending on the length, this might be perfectly good enough just to keep the pointy end going forward. All right, but we're gonna just add one more and then finish it off so it looks aesthetically pleasing. Right now, this will work. It's rough. It should do its job as it is. Okay, so I'm gonna line this next row of fletching, and again, I'm gonna iterate. The first row would have been just fine. Oh, you can't see my fingers. The first row would have been just fine. Second row, probably just as good. Third row is just going to make the end heavy, depending on the weight of your stone tip or your metal tip or your killing tip. So, but just to kind of give you an idea, and I want to finish this off nice and proper. And again, I'm just going to finish this off the same as I have done before. It's no different. It's actually no different than, you know, what we've done before. It's just finishing will be different. How we finish this off, just to make it look aesthetically pleasing. Again, you know, when you're hungry, art goes out the door. Okay, I'm just gonna be honest. When you're hungry, art goes out the door. You know, art gives no F's about your aesthetic feelings. Okay. Let's just keep that 100, as they say, as the cool kids say. Okay. When you're hungry, it does not matter. As long as it works, that's the only thing that matters. If the math is mathing, then that's the only thing that matters. And then sometimes when you don't wrap it on, this is the reason why you can kind of do it this way, and it kind of matches pretty well. And then I want to get in some of the bald spots, if you will. Again, just to be aesthetically pleasing. All we're trying to do is create drag. It doesn't, it should not matter how this actually looks, to be honest. And then as I'm doing this, I'm kind of pulling off some of the stragglers that ain't working. Some of these, and then some of them I can reincorporate into. Based on what I see is not working right or is balding. So I find that the pine needles work fairly good as a fletching. They work really well, actually, and they're actually easy to work with, you know. And depending on your region, they're quite abundant, and they're easier to work with when they are green. I let these dry out, and I'm reconstituting them. This is something you can do on the quick, and you're able to create a shaft, find a shaft, and you know, you can wrap some fletching around it fairly quickly. This may not be the prettiest job, but it'll work out. Okay, I've taken my third row of fletching, and I want to finish this off and kind of beautify it. Again, in a survival situation, as long as it's functional, you know. One thing I've learned, and which is very interesting about ancient archaeology and primitive technology, is that human beings really didn't discover or refine art until their bellies were full. Keep that in mind. Things didn't get cool looking until, you know, the major base needs were met. That's when art came into play. Prior to that, in the meantime, you know, stuff is just rustic and ugly looking as long as it functioned. And then when you're sitting by the fire with a full belly, and the children are fed, then you can sit there and sharpen your tools and decorate your tools and honor the tools that actually put down the bison or the buffalo or the elk or the mastodon or the mammoth or whatever, the saber-toothed tiger, the wolf, whatever. Then we make it pretty. Okay, keep that in mind. You know, for those people that have never really truly been hungry, that's a thing to keep in mind. You know, when you're hungry, as long as it works and gets some food in your belly, you'll be straight. After you get into a point where things are very comfortable for you and your tribe, then you have the mental faculties, the calories to burn to, you know, make stuff look cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this out a little bit and kind of shape this up as an idea for fletching. And you could use you can use leaves, you can use cotton, you can use, you know, anything that's light enough to not compete with the end of the shaft or your projectile that is supposed to do the damage to your target, so that it goes straight and flies true. There's a science to that, the Boyer's Bible, and I think there's like 3-4 editions of that. I have not read it backwards and forwards. Some of those, so there's those lawyers out there that have done that. I have 1 or 2 copies of those. I get it. I understand it. At the end of the day, that's really what this is about. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna beautify this up a little bit and then call it a day. Okay, so on this side of things, what I'm going to do is I've got my loop for my common whipping, and I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna finish it right about here, if you can see that. All right, and then I'm gonna just start whipping or wrapping my cordage on the shaft all the way down. Okay, this is going to give some streamline, just in case whatever my quarry may be, this actually may go through, and I don't want to. It may go through their hide, their body cavities, yada yada yada. Sorry if it's gruesome, but that's just what it is. Life is life. If you don't like it, sorry, you can go to another channel. We all live, and part of life is death, and part of death is life. Okay, so that's just what it is. That's the space we live in, y'all. If y'all don't like it, then go someplace else. I'm just gonna be 100 right now. I'm not gonna mix words anymore. Tired of it. If you still think that your meat, your food comes from the local grocery store or bodega or wherever the heck you get your stuff from, then this may not be the channel for you at all. It's going to be 100, so choose wisely. And so I'm just going up here just to streamline things in case this goes through, so it doesn't stop, right? I mean, it can stop, and that's fine, as long as the main projectile is lodged in a vital area that will put the quarry down in as humane a manner as possible. Cool. And I may have used too much, but I'm trying to make a point. No pun intended. But I can take this through like that. And then this end here that is along the shaft here, like that. You see where my thumb, my finger is here? I can take this and I can pull this through. And that should secure everything on here fairly well. And I just want to pull it under. You don't need to pull it all the way through. You don't want to do that. Okay, and this is quick and dirty way of making some fletching. I've done more beautiful work. Sometimes people will add pine pitch to this to finish it. I just feel it adds more weight. Again, in a quick and dirty situation, then you don't need to do all that. Again, I got my cutting tool here. I'm just cutting. But here you are, and again, I'm going to cheat, and I'm just going to kind of cut some of these things away, just for aesthetics. Right now, this is ready to use as is. If they were tied onto an actual shaft. Okay, so that's how I would use pine needles to make fletching, especially for an Atl-Atl. Again, we started out making a divot for the nipple of an Atl-Atl to get in, or just to seat itself, right? So this would seat itself in, and then you could this acts like this is the knock. The nipple and the Atl-Atl is the catapulting or the mechanism that shoots the projectile forward. Okay, and the fletching is what gives the stabilization in air, particularly if the projectile point is heavier. Okay, And that's really the key to it all. That's kind of, in a nutshell. There's more studies on it. You can get mathematical about it. You know, trust the science. You know, whatever. Do your own science. But I know this works. It works actually quite well. I've made prettier ones, but this is kind of quick and dirty. Over time, these will change colors to a nice like brownish color. Like I said, you can use leaves, cotton, dandelion fluff, cattail fluff, anything that's going to create drag that's very light. This would be a pretty heavy shaft, and for this it'd probably be longer. It should be longer. It probably should be about 6 feet for this kind of weight of fletching, just to keep the thing going straight. Okay, but that's kind of start to finish. I mean, I don't know. I mean, y'all, you know, if I missed something or if I did missaid something or whatever, that's fine. I mean, you know, certain things work. I know in my experimentation, certain things work, and they work for me, and I've made them work, and you know, whatever. But if you know something different, you know something different, and I guess that's what the internet is for. So you have a worldwide encyclopedia full of people with knowledge from all over the world, and I love it. So anyways, this is basically how I would do fletching using pine needles for an Atl-Atl, and that's ATL, Atl. So in this video, I'm going to show a way of making fletching out of pine needles, and this is specifically for a projectile for use of a spear thrower or a dart thrower, also known as an Atl-Atl. So that's why it doesn't have the regular notching that an arrow would have. So the way an Atl-Atl works, and we'll get into that later, just stay tuned, is it hooks into the end, and it actually multiplies the throwing capacity of the hunter. I don't know how many times, but we'll just say, you know, by a multitude of times to throw a projectile into quarry. You know, we're talking large game. Apparently, you know, mastodons, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, boars, deer, elk, bison, etc., etc. So I'm just showing a way in this video on how to make a or at least do the fletching. So as we build out on this section, well, I don't have to repeat this process. There's lots of ways to do fletching, and I talk about it a little bit on this, but this is one way I've learned to do fletching using just regular old pine needles. So, and it's actually kind of fun. I mean, you can make fletching out of pretty much anything. And the concept is just creating drag on a projectile. So I will just show how to do this more or less quick and dirty, which is what I like. It's kind of quick and dirty, as long as you have the materials to do it. And here we go.